Hi, I'm Lydia and welcome to my study. I've been researching my family history and I thought maybe you'd be interested in that. So I used to do it by hand. Fun, time-consuming, not particularly environmentally friendly. But now I've gone digital. See, my great-grandmother was born in Goulburn and she married a man from Sydney, but her parents had actually come to Australia from Poland and she had 7 children called Florence, Eliza, Olive, Penny, or Penelope rather, Margaret, Jonathan, and Winifred. Can't forget Winifred. Then she died in a tragic boating accident. And then they had 14 children and then she died in a tragic spinning jenny accident, tragic shoe factory fire, tragic goose attack. And then I was tracing through the archives and I found that it was actually the same Joseph O'Reilly that I'd been looking at the whole time, only now he was in Hobart Town. Isn't that crazy? I could talk about my family history for days. It's true. Yeah, sorry, Mum. You thought that South Pacific cruise was going to be relaxing, didn't you? Now I've reached a bit of a dead end with one of my convict ancestors. Can't find anything else out about him. And I wonder whether maybe I'm focused a little bit too tightly on my family. And what might happen if I widen out my gaze a bit to look at some wider Tasmanian convict history. All right. Fenton, 1884. Tasmania, formerly called Van Diemen's Land, was discovered by Commodore Abel Jansz Tasman, a Dutch navigator. Discovered? All right. The early history of Tasmania, 1928. On the 24th of November 1642, Abel Jansz Tasman, Dutch navigator and explorer, sighted the west coast of Tasmania and so lifted to some extent the pall of darkness which had hung over the island for countless ages. Pall of darkness. God. All right. What about Van Diemen's Land, 2008? Tasmania was once known as Van Diemen's Land. It was given this name by the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman in 1642, and that is better. Have you ever heard of the term revisionist history? It's not really a thing. I mean, all history is revisionist. Our perspective on the past is constantly changing as our own society changes. Think about photos of yourself as a teenager. Looking back on them in your 20s, mortifying. In your 30s, they're starting to look kind of cute. And in 10 more years, trends might have changed enough that they're totally cool and vintage. Right? Right? So when a historian looks at a photograph or an archive, she's going to see it differently today compared to how she saw it 10 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 150 years ago. The place and time that a historian is living in fundamentally affects the way she researches and writes history. So if I'm going to look at Tasmanian convict history, I can't ignore the fact that who I am is going to change how I see it. Okay, so let's start with what I know. Van Diemen's Land was invaded by the British in 1803. That's 14 years after the French Revolution. 10 years before Lizzie and Darcy meet in Pride and Prejudice. 200 years before I graduate from high school. 10,000 years before this, Indigenous Australians were reflecting on the 10, 20, 30,000 years that they had already lived in Australia as the oldest continuous culture in the world. Dark Emu, Pasco, 2014. Researchers found grindstones at Cuddy Springs, which had been used to grind seeds more than 30,000 years ago, making these people the world's oldest bakers by almost 15,000 years, as the Egyptians, the next earliest, didn't bake until 17,000 BC. Wow. All right, listen up everybody. Suddenly everyone's become really awkward. If we don't talk about it, no one will know what happened.